Everyone in the Northern Hemisphere feared Darian Blackwood. As the Lycan king, his word was law, and his temper was a death sentence. He didn't do mercy, he didn't do family, and he certainly didn't do mistakes. But the universe has a funny way of humbling kings. A high-stakes gala, surrounded by the world's most dangerous alphas. Darian is untouchable until a tiny trembling hand tugs on his pristine Armani suit. It wasn't an assassin. It was a 5-year-old girl with dirty sneakers and a tear-stained face. She didn't ask for money. She looked the most terrifying predator on earth in the eye and said, "You're coming with me. I need a father." And the scariest part, she had his eyes. Buckle up. This is the story of a rejected mate, a secret heir, and a king who is about to burn the world down to keep them. The Grand Hotel in Chicago was suffocating. It wasn't the lack of air conditioning. The place was kept at a crisp 68 degrees, but the sheer density of ego in the room. The annual Alpha Summit was a necessary evil. It was where territories were disputed, treaties were signed, and weak alphas were reminded of their place. At the top of the food chain stood Darian Blackwood. At 32, Darian was the Lycan king, a creature of myth even among werewolves. He stood 6'4", built like a gladiator, with hair as black as a raven's wing, and eyes the color of molten gold. His aura alone was enough to make a grown beta vomit from anxiety. He stood near the champagne fountain, not drinking, just watching. His beta Silas stood a respectful 2 feet behind him. "The Southern Pack is getting restless about the border dispute," Silas murmured, checking his tablet. "Alpha Mateo is demanding a meeting." Darian swirled the sparkling water in his glass. "Mateo can demand all he wants. He violated the treaty when his rogues crossed the river. Tell him if he approaches me tonight, I'll remove his head before he finishes his sentence." Understood, King Darian. Darian sighed, adjusting the cuffs of his bespoke suit. He hated this. The posturing, the scent of fear mixed with cheap perfume. He wanted to be back at his estate in the mountains, running on 4 legs through the snow. He had resigned himself to a life of cold duty. He had no mate. He had stopped looking for her 5 years ago, after a night he refused to remember. And he had no heir. He was the last of the Blackwood line. He turned to leave, tired of the charade. That was when he felt it. A tiny disturbance in the air, a scent that didn't belong. Amidst the smells of expensive cologne, roasted duck, and fear, there was a smell of vanilla and strawberry shampoo. He looked down. Attached to the fabric of his terrifyingly expensive trench coat was a hand. A very small, very grimy hand. Darian froze. The entire room seemed to hold its breath. Security guards from the perimeter began to rush forward, their hands reaching for tasers, panic in their eyes. A human child had breached the security of the Alpha Summit. This was impossible. Darian raised a single hand, halting the guards in their tracks. "Stop!" He looked down further. Attached to the hand was a girl. She couldn't have been more than 5 years old. She was wearing a faded pink dress that had seen better days, and sneakers that were grey with mud. Her hair was a chaotic mess of curls tied back with a rubber band, but it was her face that struck him. She was terrified, shaking like a leaf in a storm, but her chin was tilted up. "Let go," Darian said. His voice was a low rumble, usually enough to send grown men to their knees. The girl didn't let go. She tightened her grip, bunching the fine wool of his coat. "No!" she squeaked. The alphas nearby gasped. Silas took a step forward. "Little girl, you need to—" "Quiet, Silas," Darian commanded, never taking his eyes off the child. He crouched down, bringing himself to her eye level. Even crouching, he loomed over her. The predator inside him, the Lycan, sniffed the air. Why does she smell familiar? It was a scent that triggered a deep, dormant memory in his hindbrain. "Who are you?" Darian asked, his voice softer now, though still devoid of warmth. "Where are your parents?" The girl swallowed hard. Tears welled up in her large amber eyes that were the exact same shade of molten gold as his own. "Mummy is sick," she whispered. "She's sleeping in the car. She won't wake up." Darian felt a strange tug in his chest, a physical sensation he couldn't explain. "That is a matter for the police, child. Not me." "No." The girl stomped her foot. "She said to find the strongest man. She said the king would know what to do." Darian narrowed his eyes. "And how do you know who I am?" The girl pointed a shaking finger at his chest. "Because you look like the picture in Mummy's locket, the one she cries over." The air left Darian's lungs. "What is your name?" he demanded, his heart suddenly hammering against his ribs like a war drum. "Sophie," she said. "And your mother's name?" "Aara," Sophie said. "Her name is Aara." The name hit Darian like a physical blow. The glass of water in his hand, shattered shards raining down onto the carpet. Aara. The woman he had spent one passionate, intoxicated night with 5 years ago. The woman who had vanished the next morning, leaving only a note saying she wasn't ready for his world. He had torn the country apart looking for her, only to hit dead ends. He had convinced himself she was a human who got scared, or a gold digger who lost her nerve. He looked at Sophie. The gold eyes, the stubborn chin, the dark curls. She wasn't just a child. She was his child. "Take me to her," Darian snarled, standing up to his full height. The Lycan surfaced his eyes, glowing dangerously. "Sir!" the head of security stammered. "Secure the perimeter!" Darian roared, his voice shaking the crystal chandeliers. "Nobody leaves this building. Silas, get the medical team. Now." He scooped Sophie up into his arms. She was light, too light. "Show me Sophie. Where is she?" "The parking garage." Sophie whimpered, burying her face in his neck. "The blue car." Darian Blackwood, the King of Kings, began to run. He didn't run like a man. He ran with the predatory speed of a beast, clutching the tiny girl to his chest as if she were the crown jewels. The underground parking garage was cold and smelled of exhaust fumes and damp concrete. Darian moved through the shadows, his senses dialed up to 11. He could hear the heartbeat of the child in his arms, fast, frantic, like a bird. "There," Sophie pointed. In the far corner, parked crookedly across 2 spaces, was a rusted blue Honda Civic. It was a piece of junk at least 15 years old. The back window was taped up with plastic. Darian reached the car in seconds. He handed Sophie to Silas, who had just caught up, panting. "Hold her," Darian ordered. "Do not let her look." Darian approached the driver's side. The window was fogged up. He ripped the door open, the metal groaning under his supernatural strength. Inside, slumped over the steering wheel, was Aara Vance. She looked different than the image burned into his memory. 5 years ago, she had been vibrant, flushed with youth and health. Now she was pale, her cheekbones sharp against her skin, dark circles bruising the area under her eyes. She wore a waiter's uniform from the hotel catering staff. She had been working here, under his nose. Aara, he growled, touching her neck. Her skin was burning hot. Fever, massive infection. He could smell it now, the metallic tang of sickness masking her sweet vanilla scent. Her pulse was thready, barely there. "Darian!" Her voice was a crackling whisper. She didn't open her eyes. She was delirious. Did Sophie find him?" "I'm here," Darian said, his voice trembling with a rage he hadn't felt in years. Rage at her for leaving. Rage at himself for not finding her. Rage at the universe for letting her live like this. "I'm here, Aara." He unbuckled her seatbelt and pulled her out of the car as easily as if she were a rag doll. She was alarmingly thin. "Silas!" Darian barked. "Where is the medic?" "2 minutes out, Alpha. The chopper is landing on the roof." "We don't have 2 minutes." Darian looked down at Aara. Her breathing was shallow, hitching in her chest. "Sophie." Aara murmured, her head lolling against Darian's chest. "Hide, Sophie. Don't let Matteo find her." Darian froze. Matteo, the Alpha of the Southern Pack. The rival he had almost killed earlier that evening. Why would Aara, a human woman or so, he thought, know the name of his greatest enemy? Why would Matteo want Sophie? Darian asked, his grip tightening on her. Aara's eyes fluttered open for a second. They weren't brown anymore. They flashed a dull, weak silver. Darian's world tilted on its axis. She wasn't human. She was a wolf. A latent wolf, perhaps, or one hiding her scent. But a wolf, nonetheless. "Because," Aara wheezed, a trickle of blood escaping the corner of her mouth. "She's the first hybrid born in a century. She's not just yours, Darian. She's the key to the throne." Her body went limp in his arms. "Aara, no, you do not die on me. Do you hear me?" Darian roared, his voice shifting into a Lycan howl that echoed off the concrete walls, shattering the windows of the nearby cars. He turned to Silas, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated violence. "Get the car. We are going to the estate. If she dies, Silas, I will burn this entire city to the ground." Silas nodded, pale-faced. He ushered Sophie into the back of the waiting SUV. Sophie was crying silently, clutching a worn-out teddy bear she had retrieved from the Honda. Darian climbed into the back seat with Aara cradling her head in his lap. He bit his own wrist, drawing blood, and pressed it to her lips. Lycan blood heals. It was a desperate measure usually reserved for mated pairs, but he didn't care. "Drink," he commanded softly. "Live, Aara. You have a lot of explaining to do." As the SUV screeched out of the garage, heading toward the private airfield, Darian looked at his daughter sitting on the opposite seat. Sophie watched him with wide, terrified eyes. "Is Mommy going to heaven?" Sophie asked. "No," Darian said, his eyes glowing gold. "The Grim Reaper doesn't have the clearance to take what belongs to me, and you both belong to me now." The convoy sped toward the airfield, but Darian noticed something in the rearview mirror. Black SUVs, no license plates, following them. He reached for the radio handset. "Security Team 1, we have a tail. Lethal force authorized. Protect the child at all costs." The night was just beginning, and the king had found his family. Now he had to slaughter everyone trying to take them away. The highway leading to the private airstrip was a blur of asphalt and rain. Silas was driving the reinforced Cadillac Escalade like a man possessed, swerving between lanes at 100 miles an hour. "They're closing in," Silas yelled from the front seat. "3 bogies, armored. They have sunroof gunners." Darian didn't look out the window. His entire world was focused on the back seat. He had one hand pressed over Aara's heart, pouring his own energy into her fading rhythm, and his other arm was wrapped like a steel band around Sophie. "Daddy," Sophie whispered. It was the first time she had used the word. It hit Darian harder than a silver bullet. "Close your eyes, Sophie." Darian ordered, his voice calm, but laced with a terrifying darkness. "Cover your ears and count to 100. Can you do that for me?" "Yes," she squeaked, burying her face in his jacket. Boom! The rear window shattered as a high-caliber round impacted the bulletproof glass. The glass spiderwebbed, but held. "They're using wolfsbane rounds," Silas growled. "If those hit us, pull over," Darian said. Silas glanced at the rearview mirror, his eyes wide. "Alpha, we're 5 miles from the jet. If we stop—" "I said pull over!" Darian roared. "They will not stop until they destroy this car. I won't risk them hitting Aara or the girl. Pull over and let me handle this." Silas slammed on the brakes. The heavy SUV skidded sideways tires, screaming, coming to a halt on the muddy shoulder of the dark highway. "Stay here," Darian commanded. "Lock the doors. If anyone other than me tries to open them, kill them." Darian stepped out into the rain. He didn't shift into his wolf form. He didn't need to. He was an elder Lycan, a being of ancient power. He unbuttoned his suit jacket and tossed it onto the hood of the car. The 3 pursuing black SUVs screeched to a halt 20 yards away. 12 men poured out. They were heavily armed mercenaries, reeking of synthetic wolfsbane and fear. They weren't wolves. They were human hunters, hired by a rival pack. "On the ground!" the leader shouted, aiming a rifle at Darian's chest. "Hand over the woman and the child, and we might let you live!" Darian laughed. It was a low, dry sound that made the hair on the mercenary's arms stand up. "You have made a fatal calculation," Darian said, walking slowly toward them. The rain soaked his white dress shirt, making it cling to his muscles. "You assumed I was merely an alpha." "Fire!" The leader screamed. A hail of bullets erupted. Darian moved. He was a blur of motion, faster than the human eye could track. He dodged the first volley, closing the distance in a heartbeat. His claws extended 6-inch, razor-sharp obsidian blades. The violence was absolute. Darian tore through the mercenaries like a scythe through wheat. He didn't revel in it. He was efficient. A swipe here, a crushed windpipe there. He was protecting his pack. Every blow was for Aara. Every strike was for Sophie. Within 60 seconds, 11 men were on the ground, silent. Darian grabbed the leader by the throat and lifted him 2 feet off the ground. The man gagged, dropping his rifle. "Who sent you?" Darian asked, his eyes burning with a golden fire. I don't know," the man wheezed. "Just a voice on the phone. Said the woman had something that belonged to Alpha Matteo." "Matteo?" Darian repeated the name, tasting the bile of it. He tightened his grip. "Tell your employer that war is coming, and I am bringing hell with me." Darian tossed the man into the ditch alive, but broken to deliver the message. He turned back to the car. The rain washed the blood from his hands. He took a deep breath, suppressing the beast, forcing his eyes to return to human normal. He opened the back door. Sophie was counting her hands over her ears. 98, 99, 100. She opened her eyes. She looked at Darian. He expected her to scream at the sight of his torn shirt and the destruction behind him. Instead, Sophie reached out and touched a scratch on his cheek. "Did you win?" she asked innocently. Darian felt a lump in his throat. He kissed her forehead. "Yes, little wolf, I won. Now let's get Mommy home." The flight to the Colorado mountains took 2 hours. By the time they landed, Aara was critical. Blackwood Hall sat atop a jagged cliff, a fortress of stone and glass that had housed the Lycan kings for 1,000 years. As the helicopter touched down on the helipad, a team of doctors and nurses was already waiting, led by Dr. Emily Thorne, the pack's head healer. "Condition," Emily barked as Darian carried Aara off the chopper, shielding her from the mountain wind. "Fever. Delirium. Possible poisoning," Darian said, laying Aara onto the gurney. "I gave her my blood, but it's burning through her system too fast." Emily checked Aara's pupils. "She's fighting a transition, Darian. Her wolf is trying to surface, but her human body is too weak to handle it. It's killing her." "Save her," Darian ordered, gripping the metal railing of the gurney until it bent. "Use the reserve if you have to." The reserve was a vial of ancient Lycan essence, priceless and irreplaceable. Emily looked shocked, but nodded. "Get her to the ICU now." They rushed Aara away. Darian tried to follow, but Silas stepped in front of him. "Alpha," Silas said, gently. "You cannot go in there. You are too agitated. Your aura is suppressing the medical equipment. You need to calm down." Darian snarled, pacing the hallway like a caged tiger. He wanted to tear the walls down. He wanted to hunt. "Daddy!" The small voice broke his rage. Darian turned. Sophie was standing by a marble pillar, looking tiny in the massive hallway. She was clutching her teddy bear, looking at the high vaulted ceilings and the suits of armor lining the walls. "Is this a castle?" she asked. Darian exhaled the tension leaving his shoulders. He walked over and knelt on one knee. "It is. It's your home now, Sophie." "It's big," she whispered, "and cold." "We can make it warm," Darian promised. "Are you hungry?" Sophie nodded. "I haven't eaten since breakfast. Mummy gave me her last granola bar." Darian's heart broke again. He stood up and offered her his hand. "Come, let's get you some food. And then we need to talk." He took her to the massive kitchen. The pack staff, usually bustling and noisy, went dead silent as the king entered with a dirty human-looking child. "Steak," Darian ordered the chef. "Medium rare, mashed potatoes. And what do children drink chocolate milk?" "Yes, Alpha," the chef stammered, rushing to the fridge. Darian sat Sophie on the granite island. She swung her legs, her sneakers leaving mud streaks on the expensive stone. Darian didn't care. "Sophie," Darian started leaning against the counter. "Your mother, Aara, did she ever tell you about me?" Sophie took a bite of the bread roll the chef handed her. "She said you were a king. She said you were dangerous but good. Like a thunderstorm." "A thunderstorm," Darian mused. "Did she say why she left?" Sophie frowned, thinking. "She said she had to keep me safe. She said there were bad wolves who wanted to take my magic." "Your magic?" Darian raised an eyebrow. "Yeah." Sophie put down the bread. "Sometimes when I get mad, things break. Mummy said I have to be a good girl or the bad men would find us." Darian looked at his daughter. A hybrid, born of a Lycan king and a dormant female wolf. The power inside her must be volatile. No wonder Aara ran. She was trying to hide a nuclear bomb from a world that would want to weaponize it. Suddenly, the double doors to the kitchen burst open. 3 elderly men walked in. They wore heavy velvet robes embroidered with the crest of the council. Elder Sterling, a man with grey skin and eyes like chips of ice, led them. "Darian," Sterling boomed. "What is the meaning of this? We hear reports of a massacre on the highway, a breach of the Alpha Summit, and now you bring a human stray into the heart of the pack." Darian stood up. He moved to stand between the elders and Sophie. "Careful with your tone, Sterling," Darian warned. "The council demands answers." Sterling spat. "You risk war with the South for a waiter. And this child, she smells of rogue." Sterling took a step toward Sophie, his face twisted in disgust. Sophie didn't shrink away. She looked at the old man, her amber eyes narrowing. The lights in the kitchen flickered. The heavy cast-iron pots hanging from the ceiling began to rattle. "Leave my dad alone," Sophie said. Her voice wasn't a child's squeak anymore. It had a dual-tone resonance, human and wolf layered together. Sterling froze. What is that?" Darian smirked. He placed a hand on Sophie's shoulder to calm her. "Gentlemen," Darian said coolly, "meet Sophie Blackwood, my daughter, and the future queen of this pack. If you disrespect her again, I will rip your tongues out." The kitchen fell into a stunned silence. Just then, the intercom on the wall beeped. It was Dr. Thorne. "Alpha!" Her voice was urgent. Aara is awake. She's asking for you. She says she doesn't have much time." Darian's face paled. "Watch the girl!" He snapped at Silas, and then he sprinted out of the kitchen, leaving the elders trembling in his wake. The medical wing smelled of antiseptic and ozone. Darian burst into the private room. Aara was propped up on pillows, connected to a dozen machines. She looked frail, her skin almost translucent, but her eyes were clear. The fever had broken, but something else was taking its place, a grey pallor that Darian recognized. It was the fading. Her wolf spirit was dying, dragging her human half with it. "Darian," she whispered. He was at her side in an instant, taking her cold hand in his warm ones. "I'm here. You're safe. Sophie is safe." "I know." She smiled weakly. I felt her power flare up in the kitchen. She's strong. Like you." "Why did you run, Aara?" Darian asked, his voice cracking. 5 years. We lost 5 years." Aara coughed, wincing in pain. She reached for the silver locket around her neck. "Open it." Darian fumbled with the tiny clasp. Inside was a picture of him, a paparazzi photo from a magazine, and behind it a folded scrap of paper. He unfolded it. It was a letter written in elegant, jagged handwriting. "If you tell him about the child, he dies. If you return to him, the child dies. Run, Aara Vance. Run and never look back. M." "M," Darian growled. "Matteo, I thought so too," Aara whispered. "That's why I ran. I was terrified. I was a nobody, Darian. I didn't know I was a wolf until I got pregnant. I had no pack, no protection. I thought if I stayed, you would be killed." "I am the Lycan king," Darian said fiercely. "No one kills me." "But there's more." Aara gripped his hand. It wasn't just a threat. It was a warning. My blood, my family line. We aren't just nobodies, Darian. She took a jagged breath. My grandmother. She was the oracle of the Western Woods, the one who vanished 50 years ago. Darian stared at her. The oracle bloodline was a myth. They were wolves gifted with the sight of the future. They had been hunted to extinction because their power was too dangerous. "Sophie has the sight," Darian asked, stunned. "She dreams of things before they happen," Aara said, tears slipping down her cheeks. "That's why Matteo wants her. He doesn't just want a hybrid heir. He wants to weaponize the future. He wants to know every move his enemies make before they make it." The machine beeping next to her began to speed up. Her heart rate was spiking. "I'm tired, Darian," she whispered. "No." Darian panicked. "You are not quitting. We have the best doctors." "My wolf is gone," Aara admitted. "She died to keep Sophie alive during the birth. I've been running on borrowed time for 5 years. I just needed to get her to you. My job is done." "Your job is not done," Darian shouted, gripping her shoulders. "You are her mother. You are my mate. I rejected every other woman for 5 years because I couldn't get your scent out of my head." Ilara's eyes widened. You waited." "I waited," Darian vowed. "And I am not letting you go." He turned to Dr. Thorne, who was standing in the corner looking grim. "The reserve. Give it to her." "Alpha." Dr. Thorne warned. "If she has no wolf left, the reserve will kill her instantly. It's pure Lycan energy. Without a wolf spirit to anchor it, it will burn her human body to ash." Darian looked at Aara. She was fading fast. The line on the monitor was getting flatter. "There is another way," Darian said, a dangerous idea forming in his mind. "Darian, no," Silas said from the doorway. "The bonding ritual. She's too weak. The bonding ritual was forbidden for a reason. It didn't just share strength. It bound 2 souls into one life force. If she died during the ritual, Darian would die too." "Get Sophie," Darian commanded. "What?" Silas gasped. Sophie is a hybrid. She has oracle blood and Lycan blood. She is the bridge, Darian said, his eyes glowing with a manic intensity. I need her to anchor us while I give Aara half my soul. You'll kill yourself, Silas yelled. You are the king. You cannot risk the throne for one woman. Darian turned to Silas, his face calm, terrifyingly resolved. If she dies, there is no throne. There is only dust. He climbed onto the hospital bed, pulling Aara into his arms. Bring me my daughter. We are going to rewrite the laws of magic tonight. The room was plunged into darkness as Silas cut the lights, leaving only the ambient glow of the medical monitors and the moonlight spilling in from the high windows. The air was thick with the scent of ozone and ancient magic, a smell that hadn't been felt in Blackwood Hall for centuries. Sophie sat on the edge of the hospital bed, her small legs dangling. She wasn't crying anymore. She looked from her unconscious mother to her father, her golden eyes wide with a wisdom that no 5-year-old should possess. Is it going to hurt? Sophie asked softly. Yes, Darian said honestly, sitting behind Aara, wrapping his large arms around her frail body to prop her up against his chest. It will hurt me, so it doesn't have to hurt Mommy. But I need you to be brave, Sophie. I need you to hold our hands. You are the glue. If you let go, we all get lost in the dark. Do you understand? Sophie nodded. She placed one hand on Darian's knee and the other on Aara's limp hand. Silas, guard the door, Darian commanded. If the council tries to intervene, kill them. Silas nodded, drawing a silver-plated handgun, and turned his back to the room. Darian closed his eyes. He didn't pray. Lycans didn't have gods, they had ancestors. He reached deep into his core, past the man, past the king, finding the burning sun that was his life force. It was a raging inferno of power. Usually he kept it walled off to keep from destroying everything around him. Now he had to tear the walls down. He placed his forehead against Aara's neck. I give you my breath, Darian whispered in the ancient tongue. The room temperature plummeted. Frost began to crawl up the metal bedposts. I give you my blood. I give you my strength. We are one flesh, one pack, one soul. Darian bit down on his own lip harder than necessary, using the pain to focus. He visualized his energy, a golden river flowing out of his chest and into Aara. The shock was immediate and agonizing. It felt like someone had reached into his chest and grabbed his spine. Darian gasped, his back arching. It wasn't just draining him, it was emptying him. Aara's body was a black hole, starving and desperate, sucking the life out of him faster than he anticipated. Darian! Silas shouted, turning around as the monitors began to scream. Your heart rate is dropping. You're going into cardiac arrest. Stay back. Darian gritted out through clenched teeth. Sweat poured down his face. His vision was tunneling. He looked at Sophie. The child was glowing, literally. A soft white light emanated from her skin, pulsing in time with the beeping of the heart monitor. She wasn't just holding his hand, she was filtering the energy. She was taking the raw, destructive power of the Lycan king, softening it with her oracle blood, and feeding it gently to her mother. But it wasn't enough. Aara was too far gone. Darian felt the cold creeping into his own limbs. He was dying. He was pouring his soul into a vessel that had too many holes. I can't stop, he thought. If I stop now, she dies alone. Daddy, look out! Sophie suddenly screamed. It wasn't a warning about the ritual. Sophie was looking at the window. Crash! The floor-to-ceiling window of the hospital suite imploded. A canister was thrown in, skittering across the floor. It hissed, spewing thick purple gas. Wolfsbane gas. Concentrated. Darian coughed the toxic smoke, filling his lungs instantly. His connection to Aara faltered. The ritual was disrupted. "Silas!" Darian roared, but his voice was weak. Silas was already moving, firing blindly into the smoke, but a dark shape leaped through the broken window. A wolf, massive, russet-furred and scarred. It slammed into Silas, throwing the beta into the wall with a sickening crunch. The wolf shifted mid-air landing as a naked man. It was a mercenary eyes black with drugs. He didn't go for Darian. He went for the bed. He went for Sophie. No! Darian tried to move, but the ritual had drained him to the point of paralysis. He couldn't lift his arms. He watched in horror as the assassin reached for his daughter. Sophie didn't run. She stood up on the bed, standing over her mother like a guardian angel. She looked the assassin in the eye. "Stop!" she commanded. It wasn't a shout, it was a ripple in reality. The assassin froze. Then he was thrown backward, as if hit by a cannonball. He smashed through the glass partition and landed in the hallway unconscious. Sophie collapsed, her energy spent, but the silence that followed was broken by a sound that made Darian weep with relief. A gasp, a deep, sucking breath. Aara sat up, her eyes snapped open. They weren't brown and they weren't the weak silver of a dying wolf. They were gold, bright, burning gold, mirroring Darian's own. She looked at the broken window, then at Darian, who was slumped against her. She grabbed him by the lapels of his shirt, her grip iron strong. "Darian," she said, her voice resonating with new power. "They are here. Matteo is here." Darian laughed weakly, blood dripping from his nose. "Let him come. My queen is awake." The silence that followed the soul-binding ritual was short-lived. It was shattered not by a whisper, but by a concussive boom that shook the very foundations of Blackwood Hall. Darian Blackwood, the Lycan king, fell to his knees. It wasn't the explosion that floored him, it was the sudden, hollow emptiness in his chest. For 30 years he had walked the earth with the power of a sun burning inside him. Now he felt like a candle flickering in a gale. He had poured nearly everything. He was his vitality, his dominance, the ancient magic of his bloodline into Aara. He gripped the edge of the metal hospital bed, his knuckles white, gasping for air that felt too thin. "Darian." The voice was new, yet painfully familiar. Aara sat up. She didn't move like the dying woman who had been carried in hours ago. She moved with a fluid, predatory grace. Her skin, once pale and translucent, now glowed with a subtle golden luminescence. She swung her legs off the bed, her feet touching the cold floor, and she didn't shiver. She reached for him. When her skin touched his arm, a shock wave of sensation violently snapped between them. It wasn't just a touch, it was a data transfer. Darian could feel her confusion, her sudden surge of adrenaline, and the terrifying clarity of her new senses. And she, in turn, could feel his exhaustion, a deep, marrow-level fatigue that terrified her. "You gave me too much," Aara whispered, her eyes now burning with the same molten gold hue as his widening in horror. "Darian, I can feel the emptiness. You're running on fumes." "I gave you what was required," Darian rasped, forcing himself to stand. He swayed, his vision swimming with black spots, but he locked his knees. "Can you stand? Can you run?" "I can do more than run," she said, clenching her fist. She looked at her hand, as if seeing it for the first time. The veins beneath her skin pulsed with a rhythmic golden light. "I feel electric." Boom! Another explosion, closer this time. Dust rained down from the ceiling tiles. The lights in the hallway flickered and died, replaced by the crimson strobe of the emergency backup system. "Report!" Darian barked into his comms earpiece, though his voice lacked its usual thunder. "Perimeter breached." The voice of his head guard, usually stoic, was high-pitched with panic. "Northgate is gone. They used C4. Alpha, there are hundreds of them. Not just mercenaries. Shifters. Unregistered rogues. It's a full-scale invasion force." "Matteo." Darian growled the name, tasting like ash in his mouth. "He emptied the prisons and the slums. He brought every hater of the crown to my doorstep." Darian turned to the shattered window. Through the smoke, he could see the courtyard below. It was a war zone. Tracer rounds zipped through the snowy night like angry fireflies. The pristine white snow was being churned into mud and blood. Large, dark shapes wolves were tearing through his security detail. "Where is Sophie?" Aara demanded, her maternal instinct shifting instantly into a feral protectiveness. A low growl vibrated in her chest, a sound she hadn't known she could make. "Silas has her," Darian said, grabbing a heavy tactical vest from the locker in the corner. He tried to put it on, but his fingers fumbled with the straps. Aara swatted his hands away and did it for him. Her movements were a blur of speed she couldn't yet control. She nearly ripped the Kevlar fabric. "Where the vault?" "Yes, the subterranean panic room. It's reinforced with silver-threaded steel. Nothing gets in without my retinal scan." Darian looked her in the eye. "You need to go there, now." Aara froze. She tightened the last strap on his chest, pulling him close. "No." "Aara, listen to me. I am at 20% capacity. I cannot protect you out there." "I don't need protection," she snapped, and the defiance in her voice triggered a flare of pride in Darian's chest. "I have your soul in my veins, Darian. I can feel it. It wants to fight, and I am not leaving you to die alone in the hallway." Darian looked at her. He saw the woman he had loved for 5 years, and he saw the queen he had just created. There was no arguing with her. The bond wouldn't allow it. He could feel her resolve like a stone wall in his mind. "Fine," Darian said, grabbing a heavy double-edged silver broadsword from the display mount on the wall. He tested the weight. It felt heavy. Yesterday it would have felt like a toothpick. "But you stay behind me. If you fall, I fall. Literally." The journey to the Grand Hall was a nightmare descent into chaos. They moved through the corridors of Blackwood Hall, the estate that had stood for 1,000 years. Now it was a slaughterhouse. The air was thick with the smell of cordite drywall dust and the metallic tang of shifter blood. They turned a corner near the library and ran straight into a kill squad. 5 men, mercenaries dressed in tactical black, armed with assault rifles loaded with wolfsbane hollow points. "Target acquired," one shouted. Darian didn't have the energy to shift. Shifting required a massive burst of metabolic power that he simply didn't have. He had to fight as a man. He roared a sound that was less human and more lion and charged. The first mercenary raised his rifle, but Darian was inside his guard before he could pull the trigger. Darian swung the broadsword in a brutal arc. The blade severed the rifle in half and continued through the man's collarbone, but there were 4 others. Bullets impacted Darian's vest, bruising his ribs, knocking the wind out of him. He stumbled back. "Flank him!" A mercenary lunged from the left with a combat knife. Darian parried, but his reaction time was slow. The knife sliced across his forearm. Then a blur of gold and rage slammed into the attacker. Aara didn't have a weapon. She didn't need one. She hit the mercenary with the force of a freight train. She didn't know how to fight, but she knew how to survive. She grabbed the man by his tactical vest and threw him, literally threw him down the length of the hallway. He hit the far wall with a sickening crunch and didn't move. The remaining 3 mercenaries hesitated. They looked at the slim woman in the hospital gown who had just tossed a 200-pound man like a rag doll. "What the hell is she?" one whispered. "She is the queen," Darian snarled. He used their distraction to close the distance. He was a whirlwind of steel and violence. Even weakened Darian Blackwood was a master of war. He moved with economic brutality, a slice to the hamstring, a pommel, strike to the temple, a thrust to the throat. In 10 seconds the hallway was silent again. Darian leaned against the wall, breathing heavily, sweat dripping from his nose. His arm was bleeding freely. Aara was there instantly, her hands hovering over the wound. "You're hurt." "It will heal," Darian lied. It wasn't healing. His regeneration was stalled. "We have to get to the Grand Hall. If Matteo takes the throne room, he controls the estate's automated defenses. He could vent the vault. He could kill Sophie with the push of a button." The mention of Sophie was like a shot of adrenaline to Aara. Her eyes flashed gold. "Then let's go." The Grand Hall of Blackwood Estate was a masterpiece of architecture, high vaulted ceilings, tapestries depicting the Great Lycan Wars, and a massive fireplace big enough to roast an ox. Now it was the final defensive line. When Darian and Aara burst through the oak service doors, the battle was already lost. The floor was littered with the bodies of Darian's personal guard. Standing in the center of the room, surrounded by 20 elite shifters in their human forms, was Alpha Matteo. Matteo looked pristine. He wore a tailored Italian suit beneath a tactical vest, holding a glass of Darian's own scotch in one hand and a heavy pistol in the other. He smiled when he saw them. It was a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Darian," Matteo called out, his voice echoing off the stone walls. "You look terrible. Really. I haven't seen you this pale since, well, never." Darian stepped over the body of a fallen guard, dragging his heavy sword. He positioned himself between Matteo and Aara. "Get out of my house, Matteo." Matteo laughed, sipping the scotch. "Your house. I think the deed is about to transfer, and look who you brought. The little runaway." Matteo's gaze shifted to Aara. He sniffed the air, his expression shifting from amusement to confusion. "She smells like you. Not just your mark. She smells like you. Like ancient ozone and power." Matteo's eyes widened as the realization hit him. "The ritual? You didn't. You actually performed the soul bind." He threw his head back and laughed a harsh, barking sound. "You fool! You sentimental, suicidal fool! You split your soul! No wonder you can barely hold that sword. You're not a king anymore, Darian. You're half a battery." "I have enough charge left to end you," Darian said, his voice low and dangerous. "I doubt that," Matteo sneered. He gestured to his men. "Kill the cripple, but keep the woman. If she has his power in her blood, I can drain it out of her later." The 20 elite soldiers charged. "Back to back!" Darian yelled to Aara. They moved as one. Darian took the front, swinging his broadsword in wide, sweeping arcs to keep the attackers at bay. He was fighting on instinct, now, his muscles burning with lactic acid. He cleaved through armor and flesh, but for every man he cut down, 2 more took their place. Aara protected his rear. She was unarmed, but she was discovering the terrifying potential of her new physiology. When a soldier lunged at her with a spear, she didn't dodge. She caught the spear shaft, snapped it like a twig, and drove the splintered end into the attacker's shoulder. "Shift!" Darian yelled, as a massive wolf lunged for his throat. He couldn't shift, but Aara could. Aara screamed, and the sound tore through the hall. Her body contorted bones, rearranging with a series of wet cracks that would have made a normal human pass out from pain. But to her it felt like liberation. In seconds she was gone. In her place stood a wolf of breathtaking beauty. Her fur was a mix of tawny brown and streaks of pure metallic gold. She was smaller than a typical alpha male, but she moved with supernatural speed. She intercepted the wolf, attacking Darian, slamming into its flank and tearing out its throat with a single snap of her jaws. The bond in Darian's head exploded with her sensory input. Protect. Kill. Protect. For a moment they were winning. The sheer surprise of the Queen's ferocity threw Matteo's men into disarray. Darian fought with renewed vigor, feeding off Aara's proximity. They were a whirlwind of gold and steel, a testament to the power of the mated pair. But numbers were numbers, and fatigue was absolute. A soldier managed to get inside Darian's guard. He swung a heavy mace, catching Darian in the knee. The bone cracked. Darian went down. No! Aara's voice echoed in his mind, a telepathic scream. She turned to help him, exposing her flank. "Gotcha!" Matteo whispered. He had been waiting for this moment. He raised his pistol and fired 3 shots. Thwip, thwip, thwip. They weren't bullets. They were tranquilizer darts, filled with concentrated wolfsbane distillate. They hit Aara in the neck and shoulder. The effect was instant. The golden wolf stumbled mid-stride, her legs seizing up. She crashed to the stone floor, skidding across the polished marble. She tried to rise, snarling, but the poison worked fast. Her form flickered, shimmering, until she was forced back into her human shape, naked and gasping, her veins turning black where the darts had hit. "Aara!" Darian roared. He tried to stand on his broken leg, using his sword as a crutch. He managed to get to one knee. Matteo walked over to him casually and kicked the sword out of his hand. It skittered away into the shadows. Matteo grabbed Darian by the hair, yanking his head back. "Look at her, Darian. Look at your failure." Darian strained against the grip, watching Aara writhe in pain on the floor a few yards away. The sight broke him more than the broken leg. "You see?" Matteo hissed into his ear, pulling a long, jagged knife from his belt. The blade was coated in a thick, black paste. The prophecy said the hybrid child would unite the clans. But prophecies are fragile things. If I kill the parents and raise the child in a cage, the prophecy serves me. Matteo placed the cold tip of the poisoned blade against Darian's throat. "Any last words, King of Nothing?" Darian looked at Aara. He pushed one final thought through their bond. "I love you." Aara's eyes were filled with tears, her body paralyzed. Darian, no. Matteo tightened his grip, preparing to slice. And then the air in the room changed. It wasn't a sound, it was a pressure drop. The fire in the massive hearth suddenly turned purple. The dust motes, suspended in the air, froze in place. From the high balcony overlooking the grand hall, a small voice spoke. It wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of a mountain. "Get off him!" Matteo froze. He looked up. Darian looked up. Sophie stood on the balcony railing. She shouldn't have been there. She should have been in the vault. But the heavy steel door of the vault, miles below, had been ripped off its hinges, not by a drill, but by small hands. Sophie didn't look like a 5-year-old girl anymore. Her hair was floating around her head as if she were underwater. Her eyes were glowing with such intensity that they looked like twin stars, and around her, the air rippled with visible waves of distortion. "The hybrid," Matteo whispered, fear finally cracking his arrogance. "Kill her, shoot the child." The remaining soldiers raised their weapons toward the balcony. Sophie tilted her head. "No." She thrust her hand forward. It wasn't a beam of light. It was a gravitational shear. The weapons in the soldiers' hands suddenly became unimaginably heavy. Rifles crushed fingers. Men were dragged to the ground by their own tactical vests as gravity increased tenfold in localized pockets. Bones snapped under the weight of their own bodies. The soldiers screamed as they were pinned to the floor, unable to move, crushed by the air itself. Matteo, standing over Darian, was outside the main radius of the blast. He snarled, realizing his army was neutralized. Desperation took over. "I'll kill him," Matteo screamed, raising the knife high to plunge it into Darian's heart before the child could stop him. "I'll take him with me." "Daddy!" Sophie shrieked. She didn't just use gravity this time. She jumped. She leaped from the 20-foot balcony. But she didn't fall. She floated, descending like an avenging angel, and then accelerated toward Matteo like a missile. Just as Matteo brought the knife down, Sophie hit the ground between Darian and the Alpha. She slammed her tiny hands onto the marble floor. Crack! A shockwave of purple kinetic energy exploded outward from her palms. It hit Matteo in the chest with the force of a cannonball. The Alpha's ribs shattered instantly. He was launched backward, flying through the air across the entire length of the grand hall. He smashed through the stone pillars of the fireplace, through the brickwork, and was buried under a ton of collapsing masonry. The impact shook the entire castle. Then silence. Absolute ringing silence. The purple glow faded. Sophie stood there, panting, her little chest heaving. She looked at her hands, trembling. She looked at the unconscious soldiers pinned to the floor. She turned around slowly. Darian was still on his knees, staring at her. He ignored the pain in his leg. He ignored the blood on his face. He just stared at the terrifying miracle that was his daughter. "Sophie," he whispered. The scary, glowing look vanished from her eyes, replaced by big, teary amber orbs. Her lip quivered. She ran to him, burying her face in his bloody vest. "He was going to hurt you." She sobbed, her voice tiny and muffled. "I didn't mean to break the house. I'm sorry." Darian let out a breath. He felt like he'd been holding for an hour. He wrapped his arms around her, burying his face in her curls. "It's okay," he choked out. "You can break the house. You can break the whole world, baby, as long as you're safe." "Darian!" Aara was crawling toward them. The paralysis was wearing off, though she was still weak. Darian reached out an arm and pulled her into the huddle. They sat there on the floor of the ruined grand hall, the broken king, the exhausted queen, and the child who had brought the heavens down to save them. From the pile of rubble in the fireplace, there was no movement. The threat was gone. Darian looked at his family. He felt the bond with Aara, humming steadily, repairing itself. He felt Sophie's heartbeat against his chest. "Did we win?" Sophie sniffled, wiping her nose on his vest. Darian looked at the destruction around them. He looked at the unconscious soldiers. He looked at the snow falling through the broken doors. "Yeah, kid." Darian smiled, wincing as his healing factor finally kicked in, and his leg bones snapped back into place. "I think we won." And that is the end of the story of the Lycan king and the little girl who stole his heart. What a ride. I think my favorite part was when Sophie used her powers to blast Alpha Matteo through the fireplace. Talk about karma. If you were Darian, would you have performed the forbidden ritual to save Aara, knowing it might kill you? Or would you have tried to find another way? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this story, please destroy that like button. Let's see if we can get this video to 5,000 likes. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new story. We have a new mafia romance coming next week that you do not want to miss. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.